Yeah, so today we talked quite a bit about a lot of our philosophies, a lot of our methodologies. So we wanted to spend some time going through the actual product and showing you all what our new customers are getting today. These are all things that are generally available. All of our existing customers can get these things, but we've really prepackaged a lot of our solutions together and just given you guys a great starting point to build on top of. So I'm just going to start by walking through what an end user would see, and then peel back the onion and kind of go under the covers and show you the different tools that we have. So when we built this KinOps thing, KinOps is really just the hosted version of the Kinetic platform. And we didn't feel like we should just install Kinetic and Kinetic Task and just put it out there plain Jane. We felt like we had to give our customers that were signing up and trying out Kinetic something. So we kind of stuck with our guns and built this service portal out, because we believe that organizations are really made up of teams, and those teams are groups of people that have different services that they'll publish and have other people in the organization request them. So there needs to be a place for teams to collaborate, there needs to be a place for end users to request things from those teams, and then there needs to be a place for those teams to actually fulfill things. So this is the landing page that you get when you sign into KinOps. We've tried to make it very interactive, very collaborative. So the first thing that you see is, which takes up most of the screen here, is on the home page. We're showing a list of discussions that I'm involved with. So discussions are a new feature that's going to be, John will talk about it in a little bit. It'll be released later on this year as a native part of Kinetic Request, or the Kinetic platform, so you'll be able to have real-time chat within the platform. And so really quickly here, I can see a quick glimpse of everything that's going on in the system, all of the discussions that I'm involved in. And we're doing things like SLAs and notifying team members that, hey, there's something that's actionable. And so I'll see that type of stuff on the screen when I log in. So like I said, organizations are made up of teams. So over to the left-hand side, I can see the list of teams that I'm involved in. I can click on all teams. And it's going to show me a list of all the different teams in my organization. I can see, for instance, the facilities team and the different services that the facilities team has available for me as an end user to consume. And so within here, I can do things like, if I'm a team member, I can edit the team. I can add other members to the team. Teams can have discussions. I'm on the IT team here. I can have a discussion with other people that are on the IT team and kind of manage or get a good view of what this team is supposed to do. So switching gears a little bit, where requests really originate are in this service portal. And so we've always really been a service catalog company, and we've transitioned out of that like we mentioned earlier. This is an out-of-the-box service portal that you can get as a great starting point for building your implementation, or if you're upgrading to CE, this could be a great starting point for you as well. So here I can get a quick glimpse of recent requests that I've made. I can also see the different categories of services that are available to me as an end user, and then I can search for things. So I'm going to go ahead, and again, this will be a little bit repetitive to you guys that have Kinetic already, and just do a quick search here for a phone. And so you can see that was super fast, and it's really fast because behind the scenes what we're actually doing is we're using React to render these different components here. So Chad talked about React a little bit earlier today. All of KinOps is, everything that you see as an end user is built using React. And so here I can see this request new phone. And when I click on it, I'm presented with a form. So everything kind of in this white area here is a Kinetic form, and it's built using our Kinetic form builder. I can see a quick description of my service and then fill it out. I kept this very, very simple. I have a drop-down list of locations. Maybe I can only get certain phones in certain locations, et cetera. So this is all the information that's needed to fulfill this request. And so I'm only showing the end user the stuff that they need. I'm only asking the end user for the information they need to actually submit this request. I'm not asking them for who they are, because I already know who they are, and we can look that type of stuff up later on. So when I hit submit here on this form, again, just a simple form. These forms can get pretty complex. As an end user, I'll come to a confirmation page, and I'm going to start to see activity happen downstream. I see that the submission was received, and I'm going to start seeing a ticket get created. And so as an end user, I actually have visibility into what it is that I requested here. So switching gears quickly, I'm now going to pretend that I'm a fulfiller. So a fulfiller, someone that works on the IT team, would get this mobile phone request or new phone request. They'd get an email notification saying, hey, someone's requested this. Go in and actually complete that request. So I'm going to switch hats here from the requester. I'm going to become the fulfiller. So they'd come into KinOps. And they would click on Queue here. And Queue is our lightweight ticketing system. And this can be used for things like cases or work orders. When I open up Queue, I can see that I have a provision mobile phone request here. And I can click on it. I see all of the information that I need, but only the relevant information that I need. So we talked a little bit earlier about only showing people the information they need to get the job done that's at hand. So within Queue here, I can do things like create an ad hoc task. We talked a little bit earlier about that. So maybe I'm not sure what needs to be done here. I can click this plus button and create an ad hoc task, assign it. I'll just assign it to myself, give it some information, and save it. And now I have this ad hoc task that's related to this request. And that's great for processes where you don't really know ahead of time what your process should be. See, in our workflow engine, you can kind of describe what my process should be. Maybe I should create task A, and once that's done, do task B. But if I don't really know that up front, you can just kind of create this generic work order and then create subtasks on it. And then over time, you can look at all of these work orders, and you can say, wow, it looks like we're actually creating these 3 subtasks every single time. Let's update our process so our workflow does that for us and keeps it consistent. So let's say I don't really know what I have to do at all here. Then I can actually create a discussion. Everyone told me not to do a live demo, but I wanted to, so bear with me. So anyway, I'm going to create a quick discussion here, and I'm going to invite someone to it and actually have a conversation about this ticket. So to do that, I just hit this plus button, and I can invite an outside user. I'll invite John. So unfortunately, Jeff stole my thunder a little bit earlier and kind of showed a similar demo. So John will get invited to this. I can have a conversation about this ticket. I can click on Work It. And you can see here, this is a work order. It's not generic. It doesn't have 15 tabs on it, 100 different fields on it. It's only asking me as the fulfiller for the information that I need to make this request move on. So what's the phone number that I gave this user? And I can type in the phone number, whatever the serial number is, and then say it's pending or it's complete or canceled. This is just a kinetic form, again, using the kinetic form builder. So we're just trying to switch perspectives here and we want our customers to know you can use Kinetic not only for the requesting side of things, but also the fulfillment side of things, if you don't have something to do that. So John should have joined this ticket here. You rang. Hey, John. So we can do a little bit of real-time chat here, which is kind of fun. Oh, Ben joined too. Nice. How did you do that? Nice. So I'm going to go ahead and just work this ticket quick. James, XYZ. What else do I have to show in here? I can see everyone that's online and participating in this conversation. They have like a little green halo around them. So that's really nice. It's, again, a system of engagement, so it's nice to examine your zip. Jeez, come on, John. This is what I get. What's that all about? All right, I'm going to work it before we see anything that we don't want to see. Cool. So I'm going to just put in a serial number in here. So again, I'm just asking for the information I need to complete the task at hand here. Boom, I can save that request. It submits it. This thing now has its own workflow process that can go out and actually do something behind the scenes with whatever information was gathered if needed. So you can kind of do everything completely in Kinetic Request. Now, really quickly switching gears back to that end user. I'm going to pretend now I'm the end user. I can click on my new phone request. In a second, this will be updated, and it'll show me, hey, this fulfillment task has been completed. I'll get an email notification. And so we can kind of go full circle with our request within KinOps today, and with Kinetic in general today. Are there any questions about what you're seeing so far? This is all pretty basic end user experience type stuff. Keep in mind here that you can modify the look and feel of this as much as you want. We give you full access to the underlying HTML and CSS, so you can modify these bundles to look however you want, but you have just a great starting point with a whole bunch of built-in workflows and queries that are done to just make things easier to get up and running. No questions? Okay, I'm going to start peeling back the onion. So where did we start? We started with the form builder and having this new phone request here. So I'm going to pretend I'm an admin of this form. This is what the new Kinetic form builder looks like. So some of you guys are on CE, some of you are on our older edition. This is a drag and drop form builder. Over the left-hand side, I have this library of available elements that I can drag onto my form. So if I needed a new checkbox question, I can just drag this onto my phone, give it a name, give it some values, and hit save. And that's all I need to do to add a field onto my form. Now I have this nice checkbox field on my form. Well, what if I need to make it required? Well, under validation here, I can say, hey, it should be required. Well, what if I need to make sure it's a valid IP address or a valid phone number? Well, I can apply patterns to this field and add constraints to it. Well, what if I only want this field to show at certain points? Well, I can say that it should be visible, hidden, or conditionally hidden or visible. So without ever having to type any code, you can kind of configure these forms in a very low-code fashion. But we also let you override that quite a bit. You can add custom JavaScript to your forms, and you can add custom HTML to your forms and kind of configure things right on top of this. And when you're changing things, you're only ever going to be changing this one form that you're working on here. If you make a change here, it's not going to affect some other form. So you can kind of be confident that you're not going to break anything anywhere else and introduce any risk into your system. So that's the form builder. One other thing to just point out here, one of these questions, primary location, that was a list of states. That was a drop-down list of states. And if you can see here, I've configured it to use a bridge to get that list of states. I could have defined in this form every single state, but then if I had another form, I would have to define every single state again. So we're using bridges here. And so we can reach out to external systems with the bridges to dynamically populate things like drop-down lists, radio boxes, checkboxes, things like that. In this case, we're actually storing this list of states in another form within Kinetic. So this is kind of a new concept, and again, John's going to allude to this in a little bit, but we have this new native capability, and we're calling it Data Store, and that's the ability to store data within Kinetic that's referential type data. It's not an actual request, but it's a list of states or a list of assets or a list of incidents, just things that live on kind of forever. And so we've configured this, in this case, to be a drop-down list of states, and that data lives in Kinetic and can be managed in Kinetic the same way you would manage any other data. So we can dive into that a little bit more later. When I hit submit on this form, I kicked off a workflow process. So that takes us into Kinetic Task. When a form is submitted, it calls what we call a webhook that talks to the Kinetic Task Engine, and the process that got executed is something that looks kind of like this. And so there's a number of different steps in this process. It's kind of hard for you all to see. The first thing we're doing is we're updating the status. We're saying the status of this thing is now submitted. It's no longer in this draft mode. And then we're attaching an SLA to it. And then we're figuring out which notification template should we use to send this, to send the requester the message that says, hey, thank you for submitting your request. And then we actually send that notification out. So these are all different steps within our process. And then when we get a little bit further down, we decide if we should do an approval or not. And so these are some of the basic building blocks that we built with KinOps. We tried to make a bunch of processes that were very generic and that could be used across all forms. And really for any new customers or existing customers that want to leverage this, they can. These approval routes are based upon attributes. So attributes are kind of like variables that you can assign to a form within Kinetic Request CE. If I switch back to my form builder here and kind of get outside of the form builder and just look at the form in general, I can see there's a number of different attributes or variables tied to this form. I have an icon. This is describing what icon we should show. I tell it which task form to use. So when I'm actually creating a work order in Q, in our Q app, we know what form to use to do that. And on here, I can even set an approver. And if I set this approver to something like manager or someone's username, this workflow process here is using that to decide whether I should whether I should do an approval or not. So we can kind of have our workflow depend on attributes that are defined within Kinetic request. So then if it was needed to do an approval, it would go down that route. In this case, it didn't, and it created a work order. And then once that work order was completed, we had some more routing that took place, and eventually we got this submission to be in a state of submitted. So diving just a little bit deeper into some of these different functions on this task process, all of the orange ones mean that there's some more underneath. There's something else that's happening underneath each of these steps. So one of the steps is this approval step. Here it is, approval. And this is called approval router. And I can look at this. This is called a routine, and a routine is another Kinetic task process. So I'm going into this approval router, and I can actually navigate right to that routine, which is like an embedded process. This took me to another process. And this approval router has a whole bunch of logic in it, and it's looking at that form attribute called approver, and it's saying, did they put that the approver should be the manager? And if the word manager was there, then it's routing it to do a manager approval, and that will do things like look up who's the user's manager. If the user doesn't have a manager, handle that. And so all of that never drop, never fail stuff that Ann talked about earlier is already been implemented in these kind of out-of-box routines and workflow processes. And so that's kind of what I wanted to point out, is that you can embed one process inside of another and kind of layer these things to handle all kinds of edge cases. And you as customers don't have to start from scratch. You can kind of import all of these different routines, and we have a great starting point to do that. Any questions so far? I know I'm rushing through this. Only have a couple of minutes left. So I didn't do too much of an overview of the task engine, but this is what's called a task tree. For those of you that haven't seen Kinetic Task before, over to the right in Kinetic Task, we have this library of different functions that you can kind of drag into your task process. So Kinetic has 400 or 500 off-the-shelf different connectors that you can import into your instance of Kinetic Task. And here's just a quick flavor of them. This is posted out on our Kinetic Task website. We have a whole bunch of integrations for things like Active Directory for Amazon. You heard Rich earlier, they're doing some integrations with cloud service providers, and they're using these Amazon handlers, is what they're called, these different integrations, a whole bunch of integrations for BMC. A lot of you are already leveraging those today. And so Kinetic as a company, as soon as we have resources and access to a system, we'll actually build these handlers and then publish them for consumption. And then you, our customers, can download those and modify them and use them within your own processes. So keep an eye out on these different websites. On our community website, we publish these too for new integrations. And we try to send everyone some marketing emails saying, hey, we released these new integrations for you to try out. So there's a whole slew of things that are just out of the box that can be used right away with your task processes. And so that's kind of a brief overview of the Kinetic Task Engine, a brief overview of the Kinetic front end, what an end user would see, what a fulfiller would see, and then how you actually build forms. There's a whole lot more to it. It would probably take 2 or 3 hours to get into that. There's a whole administration side that we built on top of the Kinetic Form Builder to make it easier to set things like these attributes, and I think Matt's going to jump into some of that. So I'm going to have him come up on the stage now. Yeah, sure.
You may have said this, but I may have missed it. The chat, you guys were talking about having chat available at some point.
Yep.
Was that just for KinOps, or is that for CE?
Everyone's going to get that. It's not been released to the general public yet, but look out for it later on this year. I think John's going to talk a little bit more about that. That's going to be a great new technology that we have embedded right in our Kinetic platform.
Makes me happy.
Anyone else?
Hey, James, I was going to ask, and I just really, in a way, kind of want to point it out. The whole fulfillment thing and doing specific forms for fulfillment is, I sort of feel like a real important nugget. Do you want to explain about that? I mean, they're just normal forms and normal workflow, but they get chosen?
Sure. So we feel that you shouldn't really have these generic work orders that just are asking summary and description of your problem. You want to have really targeted work orders that are for targeted steps along a process so that you're only really asking the end user for the information that you need to continue that process along. So I kind of talked about that before, and what it allows you to do is just change that one little part of your process without affecting anything else. So kind of isolating those different steps is really important and a key part of our methodology. Go ahead.
So you guys have made a couple of points about when an attribute is on one form and you can control it for that one form, you don't have to change it everywhere. But what if you want to change it everywhere? I mean, I heard maybe earlier that you could use an API to do a batch change across all forms where a field now needs to have a slightly different
That's a great
validation
point.
rule. But how would you make that more componentized so that it feels more like it's almost like a question and answer library?
It's a great point. I had it written down and I didn't talk about it, so thank you for that question. In Kinetic Request CE, the latest version of Kinetic, we have this concept of spaces. And so a space is the highest level kind of container, and spaces have their own users. And then within a space, you have this thing called caps, and that's short for kinetic apps. So you saw services and queue. Those are two caps that we built, and we allow our customers to build their own caps. So spaces can have many caps, and then caps have a bunch of forms in them. So not only do forms have attributes on them, but caps have attributes on them, and spaces have attributes on them too. So there's two different ways to solve that problem. You can set on every single form an attribute or this variable that you might need to drive your workflow. Or one of the things that we implemented in KinOps was, if it's not set at the form level, look at the cap. If it's not set at the cap level, look at the space. So the lowest level will kind of override the next level up. So we've done that all over KinOps with all of our workflow. So we can do things like say, every single form in this cap should have an approval, and you can set that in one spot and it'll cascade down. But maybe this one form should override that, and you can do that too. Great question. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Areas which, as James was mentioning, that kind of are overlays that kind of sit on top of the things that he showed. We can, we'll just jump into it here. But let's back up a little bit about kinetic implementations that we've been working on over the many years past. Really have brought a couple things to light. First of all, you all have defined structures. Things like service item categories, or pretty much everybody uses something like that. The UI that relies on form attributes, maybe we show certain things. If there's an attribute on a form that has like an approval, we show a little symbol that the person who's requesting that service knows that. Or there's a price for the service. We want to show that price out there. And then we also have supplemental information, which might be data like office locations, products, prices, and so on. And email notifications, James mentioned that as well. All of our task trees send out confirmation messages, approval requests, and those kind of things by email. And all have translation. So all that stuff has to exist in these systems to kind of support the processes you want to create. And so to do that without hard coding, we have to do things like make them dynamic. And so what we'll call evolution 1 is to make things dynamic. So the bundle strategies change to reference attributes and kind of look up data in real time. So nothing was hard coded. And task trees use that supporting data to drive processes and content. Like James was showing again, we made a decision if we go down an approval path or not, because I looked up that form and found out what did that form setting show. Okay, so we could actually control workflow based on what those values were. And that's great, but it created a new situation. It was faster to maintain certain types of things, but it still required a technical person to do that. Anne mentioned having that single point of failure being a person, and this kind of is the same thing. I can't rapidly do things if I have to wait for one person to do that when they've got 5 other jobs as well. And it also requires access to the management console, which means now I have to have domain knowledge about how that works to be able to do that sort of activity. Maybe have too much access as well. okay? I have to know what all of these elements here mean to be able to go in there and fiddle with it. So that was kind of what Evolution 1 was great, but kind of also exposed some other challenges. So enter something like the admin user interface, or the admin cap as we call it. And this is like actually Evolution 2. And this is kind of a special service catalog, if you will, for specific users, right? If they have the right access, they can see this sort of data and these sort of functions that are generally restricted. And it uses the API then to update the values in the back end of the form. And these can be all kinds of different things. And the great thing also is it's extendable. It's just using kinetic requests. It's just a portal, if you will. You can build your own types of forms on there to expose certain types of functions that your implementation requires. So we're going to play a little bit going through that. The one thing I'm going to point out, though, is the UI is in the midst of totally being redesigned a little bit now. Going to be changed to settings. We'll give a little sneak peek of that just at the end here. But I'm going to try and flip back and forth. We'll see how this works. Now, the first thing is being able to kind of manage the cap and form settings, right? We don't want to have to go into the admin tool all the time to change that image I want to have or that icon for a form, okay? So we designed this management cap to kind of solve that, and it does a couple of things. It is allowing form managers to have access to like submissions against a form so they can look at data out there. Don't have to go run a report. We're just going to show them some general information right away. They can review related items that come in. Maybe that form created a work order or it creates a task of some sort, and you can actually see that happening right there without having access to the submission. You can discuss a form. So maybe you as a form designer want to say, hey, we need to redesign this form and I want to involve many other people. And you can have a discussion now about the form and keep that whole history about why you made decisions on that form. It's like an audit log, if you will, about form changes. And of course, then manage form attributes. And if you probably didn't see it, but a form attribute is simply a text string of information. But maybe you have defined options that should be used for that because your workflow requires one of 3 options. The builder, the UI, lets you now create a drop-down list and provide only those 3 options. So now people can't mis-enter data. So let's take a peek at what that might look like. We'll see how big this can get. It's kind of small here. All right, so here is our management cap, and we've kind of launched right in there, and we can kind of manage the cap itself by just picking the cap in my space here. I've got 4 of them. I'll just jump into services quickly, and I can go in here, and I can now see and edit attributes about, now I'm context sensitive, the cap I'm interested in. So there might be some display options, what my icon is, what teams own things, what workflow options exist. Talk about those cascading attributes that start with the space, then go to the cap and the form. These are then, in this case, the cap attributes might be defined for everything else that's downstream of it. So again, I don't have to be technically knowledgeable about how Kinetic works to now manage my implementation. Right? Building categories, same thing right here on that services cap. Now if I drill in a little deeper, if I go into the service cap, I can see all the forms that are exposed within that. I like to play with the cleaning form. And if I click on cleaning now, I can see things like, show me all the submissions that are sitting out there. I can look at any submission I want to. I can click on it to see details about the submission. So think of it, now I've exposed this to a form owner, and they don't have a portal to go look at submissions and data about it, manage the description. They can totally control that. No management, no coding required to keep on top of that. So it really kind of exposes some functions to other people who typically wouldn't have that access previous to this. All right. We can also then get into where I configure the form. So configuring the form lets me now go ahead and do those cascading attributes just for the form. And we've exposed a few more things because my context is now different. So I can see things like, again, the icon I've got, what team owns this, again, descriptions, a whole bunch more workflow options. Now, again, not too many are filled in because we're letting the cap provide us that detail, overriding here only at the form level. Rich, go ahead.
Sorry. How do you manage access to this for who can see it?
Yep, these are really what I'm looking at here is a console form. And that the question, sorry, was how do we control access to this sort of here? If we jump back just to the management, the admin cap here, and we see this over here. Each one of these is represented by a console form, which is now a form in Kinetic. I can apply security rules to that form. So I can now expose this appropriately to the right, same security rules, right, exactly. Just using Kinetic to now manage Kinetic.
So within that form, you go into the Within that form, going into the management form, where they could see submissions and that type of thing, can you then further permission it so that that person who can see the submissions can't go and change the form?
Yeah, in this case, the out-of-the-box functions kind of controls a lot of this, but it's all extendable. So you can really do whatever you want to create that. Yeah, we had some discussions around lunchtime around saying, hey, maybe my submissions, let me go back and try and pull one up here to the right spot and look at that. Look at my cleaning submissions. And I can see here, we can look downstream of it. So we can see, hey, there's a fulfillment area created. Maybe you don't use the Kinetic QCAP, you use something outside of here. You could say, hey, maybe you have a bridge call now that goes to Remedy to pull back matching things that looked, or ServiceNow or Salesforce or SharePoint or whatever, and pull back those matching attributes. So now you can have that visual thing. So all extendable, because it's all written in Kinetic to do it.
A sec. There's also something that they're not going over here because they're going over the admin, but there's a cap that was written,
Before.
so the support, what's it called?
Submission
Submission
support.
support, where you can go in, it's another access in where you can see submissions without modifying submissions.
Yep.
Right. So,
Yep.
and this could be modified as well, just like the admin. Tweak it however you need it.
All right, that's great. So that's management, kind of managing your environment for you. Any questions, any more questions on that? John?
Can I just add something? I'll probably talk about it now. Okay? So these questions that I just heard are like great typical questions. And the typical question is, we have this security policy, blah, blah, blah. And if the data looks like this, then X, Y, Z. And if it's Tuesdays, blah, blah, blah. More, all kinds of things that are 100% unpredictable by any human. Companies do their securities all kinds of different ways. And we were chasing this for quite a while. I mean, group for this, group for that, group for this, group for that. Well, anyways, it ends up being a real pain because you have to manage who's in a group, who's not in a group, combinations of groups, all that kind of thing. So we went back, and I don't know, probably about 4 years ago or so, we defined or created something we call the Kinetic Security Language. It's like, I don't know of any other system that does this, but we created the Kinetic Security Language that can interpret the data and build the rules on the fly, so then you don't have to add people to groups and stuff like that. So you can have a rule like, it's a weekend, therefore it can't be seen. Or I'm a manager and it is the weekend, therefore I can see it. You know, like, nobody's ever gonna add somebody to the weekend manager group and remove them and all. Anyway, so we ended up building this thing called the Kinetic Security Language, and all of these rows of records and all of these forms and caps and spaces all have the, we call it KSL, tied to it. So you can dream up all kinds of things that we could not have dreamed up and implement them. So that's like really a big thing that solves this world of security stuff that we get asked all the time. So, and our customers are these big companies that have these policies, and I'm sure Jess got one that's really awesome nerd of it. Probably. I have a question. Okay, bring it up.
My question was around, so you say you can extend this and tweak it and change it and all that stuff, but down the road, when you want to upgrade, how are your changes preserved?
You want to answer?
Yeah, sure. I'll answer. Bounce around a little bit. So what Matt's showing is actually just a bundle and a cap. So this is meant to be extended. This is not the Kinetic core applications that our developers build. These are really starting points. So you mentioned that in your implementation you might not want to be able to see this, or you might want to be able to tweak this stuff. What we were able to build was like all of the common stuff that we knew all of our customers wanted. All of our customers wanted to be able to see a list of different submissions. What happens once you actually click into those, we kind of were able to take a best guess, but you can extend that all you want. And this is not something that gets upgraded all the time. Our Kinetic underlying application gets upgraded. This is just an extension on top. And this isn't an extension that you could have built yourself, but Kinetic said, you know what, everyone's doing this, let's kind of come up with some standards, and now it's up to you to extend. So you're not actually modifying any of the Kinetic code. You're never doing that. You're always on top of kind of the Kinetic platform, and that's why it's so easy for you to upgrade Kinetic.
Yeah. No problem. All right, we'll look at something else. So talk about translations next. And I don't know if anybody in the room is dealing with translations, but we have a couple of customers where their catalog is in 10, 12 different languages. All of their forms are in different languages and so on. And so we had a strategy before that did this. And this was the strategy. Go out to your web server or all of your web servers, define a form that matched the service item GUID entry. Within that, put all these different properties files that then had things like this, name value or key value pairs into all these translations. So super convenient, really easy to do and maintain. Yeah, but it was a strategy, and it worked great, actually. And people had just changed this as well, and it made it a little bit more, improved a little better. So now the option is, let's build one UI for that. I forgot my slides. So one interface to manage all that form translation data. It allows you to import and export easily as well. So if you're building a new form, you can define it for English, export it, and send it to all of your translators. They can send it all to you back, and you can import it all at once. All your translations are now done. It also shows you what translations are missing. If you add a new question and forget to translate it, it's going to tell you have a missing translation out there by just going to look at the console itself. And also it deploys automatically to your web servers. So that's kind of a task or a request CE type enhancement out there, but that's kind of what that does. And just a quick show again how that looks. If I go to translations, I can see right away that of my caps, I have some translations applied at one level. I can click in there and look at my services cap, and I can see we've kind of enabled a couple of locales. And I can actually see a different context level. So the bundle of services is things like the wrapper around the page, like what are my list of categories and that kind of thing. And then shared, or maybe you have a common question that exists on every single form. You can define that one time and not have to translate that on every form downstream of that. But then the form itself, you can see I've got 13 missing translations on that cleaning form. So I can click inside of that, and I can then see, hey, here's all my English ones, those are fine. And here's my French ones. I really have one done for my French translation, so I can kind of see what's going on in there. So it really makes it kind of, again, a nice interface to be able to use to manage and maintain translations, allowing you also to expand to really any supported language you want to when you have to do it. There's no upgrading or code or new files to deploy. You just get to update that right here in the system.
Does it support the non-UTF-8, like Chinese and Japanese? And
You'll import them that way. Like, yeah, you still have to put in the U code, the Unicode character name, but that's what you have to do to translate that into the system. But it does support it. Translating to Japanese and Chinese is a difficult thing. We learned that the hard way, too. All right, so we'll jump into, any more questions on translations? Not used by too many folks, but really important to those who need it.
I'm going to ask a question. Obviously never been asked before. When you build a form, I know we have these things called webhooks that you can hook up to a form. Whenever a new form gets created and it doesn't have translations, you could probably kick off a whole task tree and notify your translation team. Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. It's really state. But we have these things, webhooks, all over the place, that when system activities happen, like new forms, or a field gets added, or a category gets created, these things can happen behind the scenes. The system can be a little bit proactive about letting people know stuff.
It's just kind of an interesting comment there to talk about a webhook tied to a form, which if you think about that, if anything before CE, you didn't have the ability to drive action based on a form change. And that's really something that CE did allow as well. So when you make a form change, you can have a whole process about, let's archive the old form automatically, or let's tell my translation folks they need to actually, again, apply translation. So again, form-based webhooks are a pretty cool feature in general terms. Right, now let's jump into notifications. This has been mentioned a couple of times about, task sends emails and so on. So evolution 1, you might go into the task tree and define what your notification content was. But when you wanted to change that, you had to go back into your task tree. So again, that single point of failure, you got that person who has to go into that task tree, not screw anything else up, not make a mistake in typo or anything when putting your content in there. So we need to have a better way of doing that. So now we have a notifications area in the admin cap. And you can do things like define headers and footers to that in a snippet. That lets you do it like HTML blocks. If you've ever written HTML emails, they're horrific. And you can take those and define them one time and call it a snippet, and just have really the core content in the main part of your notification. And again, your notification then can include that snippet. What that's also cool for is defining a snippet for development email versus production email. So if you've inadvertently turned on your email engine and send, a million emails out of dev, they know when it comes out. You can have dynamic content in them as well. So at runtime, you can replace things like, again, a cap attribute with a real value or a field value at real time. And again, can preview them what they look like and import and export them as well. So notifications. All right, so here again, in KinOps, it comes with predefined notifications, pre-populated, ready to modify and change at will. So let's go here and say, okay, case created, for example. I can go look at this guy here. This is what that one looks like. We can see the snippet starts are included here, whatever that code's going to be. Here's our rough comment and what it's going to, signature that you're going to have in there as well. But let's go look at the actual content of that. You can then change it right here on the screen. Okay, even that HTML is kind of ugly looking. But you also have free or simple plain text conversations or plain text content as well. The cool thing here about it is to allow dynamic replacements and how you can do that. So we have this whole strategy behind it, but you can able to drop down, pick the cap you want to talk to, let's say services, pick a form, that cleaning form again, and now I can actually look at any of the attributes on that cap, or for that space, for that cap, for that form, anything like this, and just say, hey, how about form submission values? Here's all of my questions. I can click on those guys there and use that to replace at runtime that value in that message. So it's a way to make this super dynamic and the ability to kind of push this out to people who control those notifications, no coding related. What you have in your task engine then is a lookup to the notification tool saying, well, what was the name of the notification I'm sending? Done, that's all you need to worry about there. So again, advanced handlers that let you take care of that. James?
Can I permission who has access to one of these notifications?
You can, yes. As he shakes his head, yeah, you can do that, yeah. Yep, so just connected forms, but this is just data. These are just entries in that form. So each entry can have, again, that KSL rule that could be applied in certain data that restricts it or enables it. So you can have then, maybe you have notifications for a certain form, but you're the only one who manages that, and everything else is maybe system-wide controlled.
And that's important to note is that he was showing how you could pull down entries and information from a specific form, like pulling the values from the form and that sort of thing. If you're going to do something like that, you want to make sure that that notification is only used for that form, and that it's very clearly denoted that that template should only be used for that form, because otherwise that will be a big blank spot in the notification when it goes out for anything else.
Yep. The big caveat there, test your templates, exactly. Test your templates out there.
But like space values will be available everywhere, and then cap values will be available anywhere inside the cap that you've selected when you pull the drop down and all that sort of thing. So you have
Even
to keep
formats
context.
dates, it's cool.
It really does. So the context is really important when you're building notifications.
When you said it formats dates, what do you mean, like the time zone and stuff like that?
Not time
No,
zones.
not
It's
time zones,
whatever date is the system receiving, it'll
Right.
translate that to like a readable format
Readable
by
one,
human.
okay.
You can have multiple date formats in the same email. So if you want there to be a Monday, the 9th, comma, something, and then a day/month/year in the same email, you don't have to have them all the same format. You can have, if this one's supposed to be written out and this one's supposed to be just month/day or something, you can do different date formats for different things.
When you were selecting the fields, where was it inserting them? Wherever the cursor was?
Wherever the cursor was, yeah,
Okay.
wherever the cursor was.
Right.
Not at the end of the message, wherever the cursor was. We're good? All right. All right, so that's notifications, kind of exposing those. And then user management as well. Now, users is literally maintaining users. In CE, everybody has an account. So sometimes you have to like load those up in advance. You want to manage that as well without going into, again, just that management console to do it. So easier use of data and easier data entry, and it has an import process as well. So really quick showing that. All your user stuff comes up here. You can format this up. Again, one of the big benefits of this is you can actually then give those drop-down values if you want to about certain options, expose certain things the user can manage themselves even out here, things they can't expose and things like that. So I can see all the teams I'm in. And again, just ways to kind of make this easier than going into the admin cap if you need to do this a lot, or the admin console.
Show invite others.
In KinOps, we've created the abilities that if you're a user, you can actually say, hey, I want other people to come and play in my environment. So we have this whole invite others strategy you can do here. It's really just, again, another Kinetic form that's structured to say, hey, I can put in anybody's email address. I can assign them roles right here. I can grant them teams here, maybe make them a space admin if I want them to have fancy rights, and literally tell yourself to go, and it'll actually email them and set everything up in the back end. I mean, it's quite easy to bring somebody up on the system quite quickly. All right, jumping back in there. All right, we'll talk a little bit about Data Store, and we'll call this version 1 Data Store. And that's, if you remember in RE, you might have used the data management console. That was kind of the impetus to create this Data Store strategy in CE as well. It's just normal CE forms that can hold any type of data that become reference data in your system. So again, those prices, locations, states, whatever that might be. And the Data Store then adds a little bit of functionality, like automatically building bridges. You can use that really quickly inside of forms. So that looked like this. And some of you may have experienced or had been able to play with this a little bit. But basically, I'm looking at now the forms that are out here, and I can pull up any of these forms. I can look at records that might exist out here. And this is really just a presentation through API calls of that information. And I can then make it useful to people who want to use this in form designers or supporting other types of functionality behind the scenes. All right? So this is, again, version 1. It's pretty basic, again, just a Kinetic form. And that's going through a Genesis now to really create what we call version 2, which I think was publicly released on Friday last week. So it just came out a little bit. And it has a lot more capabilities attached to it. A lot of cycles were spent to create this. And I'm not going to go into details about it. I'm not really well versed in it just quite yet. But a couple of things are really unique about it in that it's got a custom indexing strategies. So you can define, I want to search for these 2 fields, and you can actually have a unique index for those fields you want, which you could not do before. We didn't have that capability. So you can now do uniqueness at the index level. You can have 2 or 3 fields concatenated together to make a unique index and really make things super performant. And what that does is allow us to create a system of record. A couple years back, actually at the first KEG, we really talked about the whole customer experience, and system of engagement became a term we kind of used a lot as opposed to system of record. And we always had other systems storing the end result of a submission, right? To do that, we'd push something into Remedy or ServiceNow or what have you. Now, this really allows us to have that system of record as well. So now we're talking to groups who don't have any of that stuff. Everything is in Kinetic. I need places to store and make that data accessible, super performant, and so on. And that's what Data Store kind of lets us do. So it kind of gives us both halves. We could have done it before. Now it just makes it a real thing we can talk about, feeling strong about that. And also allows some advanced UI searching in there as well. Let's jump back. Let's see if I can get there. Let's see. Oops. So that's what it's going to look like when it's fully, it actually is ready to come out pretty soon here. And you can click on any of those locations there and start searching for things. Pull back your matching values. Now this does not have the 1,000,000 records that we did, but we got a demo of this internally, and that 1,000,000 record searching was that fast to come back with a record that matches it. So it's super, again, super performant. Lets you do things like advanced searching. You can pick fields. A little bit of equals to, and I do multiple fields. I can even do a starts with type match. So we're really kind of able to really extend some functionality out here and really make Data Store truly a thing that really adds to the system value. Just a couple more here. Robot, which is really not so much an admin function, but it's the ability to put scheduled times on task executions. So really kind of cool. You just define a task tree. You define then a schedule when that should run, and those schedules can include unique inputs. and it's going to record each execution that it fires for you. And you can say, hey, notify me when it's done, or when my schedule is complete, then notify me that as well. So now it's the equivalent of having maybe the alert or the escalation tool in Remedy, kind of equivalent to what you have over here, if you want to draw a correlation. So back over here, you'll see what we've got listed. So I define a robot that just basically says what task tree is supposed to be fired. In this case, it'll be the test task tree. I define a schedule when it should be fired. Nothing is created right here. But you can do schedules based on time-based activities. So on a monthly schedule, I want to run this on maybe the last Friday of the month. So I define that schedule here, and then I can pick, when it should start or end its processes and notifications and so on. But then what's going to happen is this is going to have pass this to the task tree, and the task tree will now just wait for those issues to happen, schedule the next occurrence, and the task is going to manage this whole entire schedule happening, always looking to see if the schedule definition has changed. So you can really do a lot of kind of interesting things. We have one that tells our marketing team to look at our Facebook profile pages and our LinkedIn pages and so on, like every 2 months. So we just get a ticket to go do that work and close those off as completed. And all of our employees get one as well to check their LinkedIn things like about once a year. So again, this is interesting ways to use this sort of technology to notify people to do things that might not be related to anything in your environment, just typical reminders.
Point to, you choose what task and you point to like you have to take it out, or is it like you can only use it on one?
Yeah, what's going to happen here is this, okay, the question was, can we point this to specific task or task engines in the system? So you can, because what's going to happen is this schedule will call one specific tree. Now it's going to say, what am I supposed to run? Well, I'm supposed to run this specific tree right here. That's just a handler that runs a tree. So that can be pointing to anything you want it to point to. Yeah. Questions? All right, so that's a little way to execute some stuff. So before I move on there, though, let's jump back and just look at this. The idea is you can extend and add more things. Everybody's implementation in Kinetic takes on a different flavor, and you might have new things you need to add down here. So these were all built. They have kind of bundle code behind them, but you can also just build a form, and the form itself can be a console that appears on this screen. So any implementation you have that requires management, you can build it here and evolve that like any other form. So it's a way to kind of let you create these management things as well without requiring a bunch of code in the back end to do that. Again, evolution 3 then is to say, hey, this was great, but now let's make it, again, more context aware from where I'm at, and we're going to kind of change that kind of term into settings, and kind of that arrow down here in the lower left is where you're going to access that from the space homepage or a CAP or anywhere else to kind of jump you right into that area. So that's kind of what's happening right now, just being released with the most recent things. Again, a cool thing to be on KinOps is that every time we have a release, that stuff just rolls out. So you get to see these new features. Every 2 days, we have something new coming out to expose and talk about. Settings is how you access the admin cap. I was going to a special cap before when I was navigating up here. Go to a special cap up here, click on admin console, do that. Now, it literally will just be wherever I am at the page, wherever I am, I'm going to have the settings. If I was in services, just tell me it's going to be there. Not there yet? Oh, just on the homepage, so. Again, it's rolling out all the time. So from that homepage, we're able to kind of get back and see those settings area. But it will be context sensitive throughout the system. How are we communicating the KinOps to changes as they roll them out?
We'll be using a robot to do that.
All right, so basically admin cap reduces the need to access the management console by your end users. It allows, or by the people who can do it actually, allows others to manage aspects of your implementation, not just your trained team. Lets you build console, support your own implementation. And admin consoles evolve like any form. So of course, today it works like this. Tomorrow you need to do something else. Evolve like anything else in your system. Let you support your applications. All righty. So that'll wrap up our kind of walkthrough of what's in KinOps.